In this episode of the podcast, I'm chatting with repeat guest barrister Catherine Christensen of Valour Law. I'm also chatting with Brett Campbell and Bart Postma. Both of these individuals are part of a $500 million lawsuit that is being served against the Canadian Armed Forces for abuse of power. These two individuals were forced out of the Canadian Armed Forces, a career they loved, because they refused to go along with the Canadian Armed Forces COVID mandates. Catherine Christensen is there to represent them and all those, the 329 members that were not able to carry on with the career that they love so much. In this conversation, we talk about a few things, but more importantly, we expose a dark underbelly of Canadian niceness. We've been Canada the good for far too long. Part of that goodness, that niceness, is that we're not kind. We're not able to say the hard truths that need to be said. And in this discussion, we realized that so many of us didn't agree with what was happening, not only in the Canadian Armed Forces, but in our communities, but failed to say anything. This is something that we're going to have to rectify as a country, as a military, but more importantly, with ourselves. So I hope you enjoy the episode. I really hope that you can support these 329 members by not only buying a t-shirt like this one here, the 329, which is actually now 330. I'm going to have to change the shirt for support of the Valour Legal Action Fund, which is actually supporting those members that are suing the government. So $1 from each one of the purchases of this shirt goes to that fund. But additionally, if you could like, subscribe, and share this episode widely, because as we know, Canadian news is not being shared anymore on social media platforms. We need to ensure that the rest of the world and Canadians know what's going on here and know the personal stories that this mandate era affected. That's it from me. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, here we go. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. I'm sitting here once again with Catherine Christensen from Valour Law. She, as you may know, is the barrister that is bringing the lawsuit to the Canadian Armed Forces to the tune of $500 million for abuse of power. Our last episode was huge, and I think it's partly because most Canadians don't know what's going on, and we're providing a glimpse into what has happened to a bunch of the members that are part of this lawsuit. So today I'm sitting with Brett and Bart. They are two members of the Canadian Armed Forces, or former members of the Canadian Armed Forces, that were a part of the group of members that were released due to the fact that they did not want to get vaccinated. So I want to welcome Catherine, Brett, and Bart to the show. This is going to be a really good way for Canadians, I think, to connect to individuals personally, and that's my intent moving forward. So Catherine, I want to shoot it over to you first. Just a recap of where we left off last time. So the CAF released a lot of soldiers. Officially on your mass tort, there's 329. And just anecdotally, I know there's a lot more that are probably coming down the pipe. As far as I know, the Canadian Armed Forces still has a vax mandate, and maybe you can clear that up. And essentially, you're here to represent those that have been, that have had essentially their rights infringed, but more importantly, they were wrongfully dismissed, and we're taking it to the courts so that we can get some closure on that. So, Catherine, always a pleasure to have you back on the show. If you have any updates, that'd be great, and give us some context as to what's going on with the case right now, please.
Well, one of the updates I can give you is the number's now officially 330. There were a few changes to some names on
I gotta change my shirt.
You gotta change your shirt.
I gotta scratch it out.
Scratch it out. But I can also tell you that there's a 2.0 version of this lawsuit coming down very shortly with hundreds more. Because once word got out about the original mass tort, I've definitely been approached. I've also been approached by well over 150 vaccine injured members of the Canadian Armed Forces. So I can officially tell you that this mandate has taken out more members of the Canadian Armed Forces than the Taliban.
Wow.
Ever did.
Now
So
that's
one way of
headline.
putting it in perspective. So
That's a headline.
yeah, there's a headline for you. So we got that going on. Also, interestingly enough, it's now attracted the attention of mainstream media, which is saying something for this topic. They need to expose this abuse of power. They get focused on the COVID piece, but as I've said, the lawsuit is about how CAF treated their people. They've had a problem with this for decades, and the mandate gave me the perfect example of an event happening on a specific time, October 2021, and then all the things that the chain of command did that abused their power between then and still continuing today. We've still got stuff going on from chain of command laughing at people with cardiac arrhythmias in young men because they thought it was a joke. People that were injured in their service and were post-op from surgeries that were denied medical releases because they weren't getting vaccinated, even though they were on medical leave and on their way out with the medical pension. To people that agreed to be vaccinated and were vaccinated in the back alley behind the field hospital because they were considered too dangerous to walk into the clinic to receive their injection. So on top of all the other stories I've told you, and the stories you're going to hear directly from two of the members of the lawsuit today. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Certainly the military review committee for grievances, we've had more come down, all in our client's favor, saying yes, that their rights were breached. Yes, that's should have used Section 126, did not. And anytime the Chief of Defense Staff issues an order that breaches the Charter of Rights, it's an unlawful order. I don't care what constitutional expert they drag out, as CTV did the other day. An unlawful order is an unlawful order, and then the whole deck of cards falls apart.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The overarching principle here is abuse of power, and that's often it gets lost in the sauce, especially with the last conversation we had. It's like, well, they're in the military, they should just shut the fuck up and do as they're told because they're supposed to take orders. It's like, hold on a sec. That's an issue in and of itself. The abuse of power is the main thing here because they didn't follow the rules they set up themselves. And in any other context, that's an abuse of power. Doesn't matter left, right, doesn't matter what your political ideology is. And that's where the focus obviously needs to go. And that's why your lawsuit has a very unique approach in that sense, because it's clear there were some serious issues there, and the allegations are pretty serious. Let's put it that way. So thanks for that summary there, Catherine. So I'm going to send it over to Bart. Bart, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you volunteering to tell your story. And I just want to say to both of you guys, Brett and Bart, tons of respect for you guys sticking to your guns, sticking to your principles, because I included, caved to the pressure, the huge amounts of pressure that were out there. And that's something that I live with now. And I know there's a lot of guys and gals in the forces that live with that as well. But you guys are the folks that held the line. So I really appreciate that you did that. And now you're here to tell your story. And I want to start with you, Bart. So what was your career like? And then how did you end up here, released from the forces and now chatting on the podcast and part of a lawsuit?
So just quickly about my background. I was 24 years in the Air Force. I served as a Sea King pilot first for 10 years. Then I moved over to Moose Jaw to be an instructor. and I had the honor and privilege of being a snowbird pilot for 2 years in 2014
Very
and
cool.
15. Childhood dream complete. And yeah, it was top of my game at the end of it. I was actually an instructor in Moose Jaw. I had started to see things go south pretty early on. So I started the fight well before COVID, actually. And I first got in trouble a little bit for Facebook posts, which I found ridiculous. I was well aware of what my free speech rights were, even as a military member, and I was simply just sharing posts that were negative of Trudeau. I was shocked and appalled to learn about a year before COVID that I had been investigated all the way up to Winnipeg for my Facebook posts just because they were negative about Trudeau. I wouldn't have known I was even investigated. It never did. Nothing ever happened. But because I knew everybody around the base, I quickly got word of what was going on. So I was already starting to get worried about our charter rights back then. I took leave after that, after my second son was born. So I was on parental for the summer, and that's when the COVID stuff started to happen. So immediately when I got back, I could see what was going on. It was just, the mandates were ludicrous. I started the fight with the mask immediately, and I just walked right onto the base and I refused to wear a mask. And I got away with that for about 2 weeks before I was called into the CO's office. And right there, you could tell that they had either no idea about human rights or they just didn't care about them anymore. I requested a religious accommodation verbally because it had, for my family and I, it took on a religious aspect. It was just so bizarre that they were forcing everybody to take part in this lie of cloth masks protecting everybody. It was pure insanity. So it was genuine. I said, this is religious. Like, I feel like it's an affront to God that I expected to go along with this lie that masks, and I'm going to be forced to put masks on my young children. I'm just not going to do it. So the first thing the CEO of the school there in Moose Jaw told me was that they didn't do religious accommodations. It wasn't available at the school.
Like
next,
you sign it out from the QM? It's like, sorry, we can't sign that out to you.
We don't do that here. We don't do that at our unit. So then I'm like, I'm pretty sure you do. Yeah. Then she told me, well, I'd no longer be employable as a pilot. She knew that obviously I love to fly, so she was right out of the gate with punitive measures, that I was not going to be employable at the unit anymore. It escalated quickly to them slapping, her and the chief slapping masks down on the table in front of me after I told them it was a religious thing and said, you're not allowed to leave the building unless you put this mask on right now. I said, I just told you it's a religious thing. I'm not going to do that. Then they said, well, then you're not allowed to leave the building. So I said, am I being detained? And for a moment there was a silence because we were at an impasse. And then eventually I just said, well, okay, I'll leave the building, but I'll go straight to my vehicle, and we can sort it out from there. And she said I wasn't allowed to go get my coat and car keys. So they really have a thing about trying to, it was wintertime too. They really have a thing somehow about trapping people outside in the cold without coats on. They really love that measure. It's like they're all coordinating together, trap them outside in the cold. Anyway, I got my direct supervisor, which was, he was a reasonable guy. He was a witness to the events too. He got my coat and car keys for me then. So from there, it was just an exercise in insanity. So I put in the request for religious accommodation. It was essentially to just do all my duties remotely via computer, and then the only time I would come into work was to fly the aircraft, during which time I'd be wearing an oxygen mask anyway.
You didn't have to put a cloth mask underneath your oxygen mask?
Yeah, exactly. That
Okay,
wasn't a
just
rule.
checking.
And it wasn't even a rule at the time to have masks outdoors. At that time, you didn't even have to have masks. There was no provincial mandates, and the military didn't have the outdoor mask policy. So I thought that would work, but I thought they would be reasonable. Uh, of course, they weren't. They denied the accommodation right away. Uh, and it just quickly boiled down to that I was my presence on the base was a health and safety threat to D&D personnel, civilian personnel, and their families,
So,
with no evidence whatsoever to back that up. I provided all sorts of
so
evidence, studies to show that
right.
masks were
So, were you
ineffective. Yeah.
like, were you in the counseling process yet? Did they take you down that route? Like, were you, because there, I mean, like, were you issued an initial warning? Did you go through the administrative process, or was it
No,
just all of a sudden they're like, hey, get
no.
outside, get out of here, no coat, no flying for you, and no administrative action to actually enforce that?
Yeah, they started out of the gate with
Whoa.
that, and then they seemed like they looked it up later and found out, oh no, we do have to do accommodation. So I wrote the memo for accommodation, like I said, explaining how I wish to operate. They denied it. They just denied it. They just said no. But then weirdly afterwards, when I started the grievance process, they said that they did. There was never any issue about whether or not it was sincere. So at least they started out. They tried to talk to the Padre and get him to overrule me on my beliefs, which is ridiculous. And yeah, they essentially just deemed my presence as a threat to health and safety. Then they claimed that they were accommodating me just because they weren't firing me. They were going to post me somewhere and they knew what would occur. They knew that if they posted me, I would probably retire. And I quickly got backed into the corner where, yeah, I had to think of my family, and because I could see the writing on the wall already with as soon as they were starting the vaccination
Mm-hmm.
process, started to say it wasn't mandatory, then it was mandatory. I gotta retreat to a more solid ground to keep my family safe, and that's
Okay.
what I did. So I started the VR process almost straight away because I knew the level of vindictiveness and bullying that I was dealing with. It was clearly a personal thing. They wanted to hurt me, so I knew it was time to. I better get
One,
out of there before they take my
yeah. Okay. So
pension
one
away.
question for you. Up until then, I'm assuming that you're at the pinnacle of our Air Force when it comes to being a snowbird. You're the cool guy wearing the red suit that I just showed. Like, if you're American and you're tuning in, like, you made it there because of your character and your competence at what you do. Did you ever experience any mistreatment or anything of that sort up until this moment?
No, like I said, I guess it was the start of it was pre-COVID because I could see the quick change occurring. Essentially, it's communist type behavior where they start the purge and they're looking for people that don't support their dear leader Trudeau because they started an investigation on me because I posted a few National Post articles that were negative
Right.
towards Trudeau. So yeah, that would have been the start of it, which was good because I was kind of pre-awakened to how ruthless they were going to be. So again, with the mask, I could see what they were up to. It was a step, I could see right from the beginning. It's going to be forced vaccinations, forced masks, everything. So I thought I'd start fighting right away. Honestly, at the time though, because I was out ahead, I felt pretty alone. There wasn't a lot of people that were willing to stand next to me and not wear a mask, even though I had hundreds of people coming up to me saying, I can't believe you got the guts to walk around here without a mask. Like I hate these masks. But so, I mean, I guess that's not to make excuses or anything, but that was part of the decision making too. I felt quite
Right.
alone. I didn't know if anybody was going to actually stand shoulder to shoulder with me, and I had to think about my family. So I VR'd, and I'm so thankful that I had that position to retreat to, and mostly I'm involved in following along here because there's several guys that I flew with who are excellent pilots, top of their game also, and they didn't have that option, and I really feel for them, and I hope they get some sort of
Mm-hmm.
compensation.
Bart, that's that's a hell of a decision you had to make, and obviously a hell of an ordeal you had to go through. So thanks for sharing that. It's really good to hear that you held the line and you were able to maintain your integrity throughout. So I'll get back to you later, Bart, with a few more questions. But Brett, you've been waiting patiently. I know you were at 1 Battalion, right? RCR. And
Yep.
how long were you in the forces, and then what led to you being released?
So I actually joined pretty late. So I did 6 years. My story is kind of funny, and I think I got kind of lucky with it. I was not 5F'd, technically. I went through the whole 5F process, but the 5F papers didn't go through before my contract was up. So my contract was up in March of 2022, and we started dealing with this psychological bullshit in November, and even before that, of 2021. So I did 6 years. I was in sniper platoon for a couple of years there, and I had just, I thought I had just started my dream career. Like I wanted to be a sniper as soon as I joined the military. I got to that point, and I was in the platoon, and then I had ambitions to go, try out for selection and stuff. And then I just saw the corruption happening with COVID, and I immediately just like snapped out of it. I was like, what is happening here? This is something I need to question, because everyone who's been in the military would agree with me that it's miniature communism in the military as it is, with the rules and everything we do, right? And we're okay with that because we have to be a form that works together to do what we need to do if we're ever called upon to do something. And when I started seeing communism in my civilian life, I started questioning everything, and that's when I was, I really started to ask questions, and then I saw a lot of people who agreed with me, but they're too scared to say anything. And they were essentially censoring their speech in real life, which is like probably the scariest thing you can think of, when all these hard as fuck dudes in the military I've never been to war. I don't have any combat experience. I went to Latvia, that's it. But all these guys who've been to war, they've been to Afghanistan. These hard as fuck guys that I thought were going to stand up to this just went along with it. I was super confused. I thought instantly, I thought our chain of command was going to have our back on this and be like, no, this is BS. We're going to shut it down right now. And I was like, why doesn't everyone just stand up and stop this right now? Because 2 weeks before they came to us and said, you guys are going to be out in 30 days. And that 30-day mark was going to be end of December. So you're not going to have a job or income around Christmas time. Right before, and all the coercion and the threats was once a week, every week, for months, until a lot of people cracked. There was almost 100 people at my battalion, from what I know of, that weren't vaccinated at that point in time. But then at a certain day, I wasn't allowed in the building because I wasn't vaccinated. But there was other guys that had an appointment booked to get their first vaccine 3 months from now that were allowed in the building. So again, the science didn't make sense in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So it's I was like, can people not just question this and figure this out? So immediately I was like, look, I joined the military at 27 years old. I was turned 28 in basic training. So I had, experience and skills before I joined. They were threatening me with, what are you going to do? What, you're going to leave? We spent all this money training you. Why are you going to leave? And you're not going to be able to make an income. Well, I was an architect before I joined the military, and I had lots of construction experience. So I literally went to the store, spent thousands of dollars on tools on my visa, and started my own construction business. Right. I had no other options. And it's been tough. I've been, going at it ever since. And I unfortunately chose the career that is only busy 6 months out of the year, decks and fences. Kind of messed up on that one, but I do side stuff for another company during the winter as well. So I'm lucky now, but yeah, it's been rough, and I mean, I'm rambling on. Just
Yeah.
ask me a question or
No,
stop
but
me at any time.
I mean,
But
yeah, what I'm
right off,
hearing here
sorry, go
is
ahead.
very similar to Bart. It's the level of
Yeah, yeah,
coercion, bullying, and
yeah,
the first thing that popped to mind was gang colors, right? Are you in or out? And
yes, yeah,
typically, we're part
yep,
of the Canadian Armed Forces, so we think, oh, we're part of the CAF family, like we're a brotherhood, if you want to call it. And so therefore, if you're family, you look out
mm-hmm.
for each other, and that's how it's sold, and that's how we're trained. But then this comes up. This must have
Yep,
caused an emotional uproar, and you joined later, which is an important point, because since you joined after the age of 25, your
mm-hmm.
ego is very well formed. So you have a lot more life experience than a
Yeah,
19, 20, 21-year-old that is in battalion. And
very well
that
put.
has
Very
a
well
huge
put.
impact, and that's typically why you want younger recruits, because they're easily molded, right? They easily become part of the
Mm-hmm.
tribe a lot easier, because now this is your family. But when you're a bit older, you can see through the bullshit because you have that life experience. So
Yep,
it's interesting that you brought that up, and you joined it, and you were the guy that was like, nah, hey, whoa. So you're like the elder statesman at that point. So the
yeah,
thing that's really stands out, though, is that people didn't say anything. And this is a point that I brought up because I'm a big fan now of Russian literature, especially Alexander Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago. And he says it time and time again. How many tens of millions of people were murdered? But when they started coming through the villages and the police were rounding up people, if people had just started screaming and taking bottles and been like, fuck you, get out of here, there would have been no way
yeah,
that they would have been able to carry on. But they were able to convince you that you're going to lose your job, might
mm-hmm.
lose your life, we might take your kids. And so, the impossible position that you're in, especially, like, I don't know if you have kids or if you have a family,
Yeah.
but if
I have a
so, I
stepdaughter
mean,
who's
like, the
12.
loss of
Yeah,
income, especially for a man, that's almost like death, because now you can't provide. So of course they're going to
yeah,
dangle that
mm-hmm.
and figure, and they say, well, what are you going to do? Like, you're some dum that can't figure it out, right? Like, oh, this is the
And
only thing you're going to be able to do.
they took, yeah, they took my LDA
Oh,
away.
wow.
They took it away. That was $500 a month. They after the massive amount of coercion, and I kept signing papers saying, just continue doing what you're doing. I'm not going to take it. They finally called me in the office and said, you want to just sign here? And I said, are you stealing from me right now? And like, the guy was nervous. He's like, yeah, we're taking your LDA. I was like,
And for those
I
that
almost,
don't know, that's a land
yeah,
duty allowance. So
that's,
that's it's an allowance for
yeah.
guys like yourself. Yeah.
I had to move. My rent was $600 a month in Pembroke. I had to move back on base in shacks, and because I couldn't afford it anymore, right? So that's a massive amount of, like, $500 a month is a
Mm-hmm.
huge amount, and that's when I was like, okay, this is getting real, and right from the start they made us part of the propaganda. So a lot of people don't know this, but they make an appointment for your vaccine regardless of whether you're getting it or not. I told my chain of command I'm not getting it, no matter what. The higher ups make your appointment, you have to show up, and then you stand on the dotted line 6 feet apart, and you're all in a little square box. You're being told about the vaccine, and they briefly label off some side effects, and you go, and I say, okay, can I go now? They go, no, you have to go talk to the doctor who's going to administer the vaccine. I said, okay. I sit down, and the guys, there's all these desks, like, beside each other, and he's like, are you going to take it or no? And I said, no. He goes, okay, well, you have to pretend to take it.
What?
And I was like, what? He's like, I have to make it look like I'm giving it to you. And I said, why? He's like, well, if you don't do this, you'll get charged. And I said, so you're making me part of the propaganda, essentially. So I had to lift up my sleeve and fake get it. He held the needle up to my arm and fake get it. Put the needle back down, put a paper on top of it, wrote something down on a piece of paper, and I walked away. And I had to still wait the 15 minutes in case I had an adverse reaction to the fake vaccine that I just got.
That is cuckoo bananas.
And
What?
I told my buddies that. They're like, yeah, it's pretty messed up.
Well, how many people did that
Like,
happen
what
to
the
then?
fuck?
I mean, like, it can't just be you're the only one. So didn't that
Yeah,
make you vaccinated,
exactly.
though?
So that's the thing. Everyone had their own rules when it came to what you would do. If someone said they weren't going to get it, maybe their chain of command didn't make them go to the appointment. But it got to the point where I had to go right to the needle and say no to the needle, They wanted the last minute chance of me saying, "Oh, screw it, let's get it." Every chance they could get, they wanted to make sure that we were going to try and get it, and we didn't. And yeah, there's a lot of things I'm forgetting. I mean, when I was leaving from I have to do a medical when you leave, right? And I think actually Catherine has this on video because I recorded it. But I wasn't wearing a mask going into the CDU, and the lady at the front stopped me, and she said, "Oh, you have to wear a mask." She was nice about it, whatever. And I said, "Well, I'm not wearing one." She said, "Okay, let me get the sergeant major." He comes out and he starts telling me I have to wear a mask, and I said, "Well, I'm not wearing one." I was like, "Are you refusing me medical service because I won't muzzle myself right now?" And it took him like four or five times for me to say that before he finally said, "Yes, we are." I was like, "Thank you," and I walked out. And that was a sergeant major. Like these people who served this country for so long, and they fought in wars. They all they wanted to do was help people, and all of a sudden they get told this bullshit lie, and they just go along with it no matter what. Like, it was never for the boys. We were never supposed to be. I don't even know how to explain it. It angers me so much.
You can tell.
And it's been almost 3.5 years. Like, figured it.
Yeah, the emotional burden something like this has, and it's it's a moral injury. That's what you, Bart, most likely, me, a lot of us, and I had a buddy of mine. He was overseas in Afghanistan a few years before me, and he's like, "Man," he's like, "I did not serve this country to see what's going on now." He's like, "We went over there with to bring Canadian values to a foreign country, and I believed in it." He's like, this isn't the country I served for, man. And it causes a dysregulation within you because you have this idea of what the country stands for, and then almost overnight you have your buddies, your chain of command saying that somehow you are now the problem, you are now the enemy, and that is awful for anybody. And in your case, you lost like you said, the job that you love, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And we'll get back to you in a sec. I want to head back to Catherine. Sorry, I need to get a grip of my emotions now after hearing those stories. When it comes to the abuse of power, Catherine, there seems to be so much that went wrong. How in the world did we go from what was seemingly a law-abiding, rule of law-based society, and especially the military, which is everything is codified in military law, the National Defense Act, QR or KRNOs now. I'd like to hear how you think this all unraveled so quickly, so fast.
I think part of it is a new culture in the Canadian Armed Forces that you do whatever you need to do to get promoted up into the ranks, especially in the higher officer corps. I also think that they need to seriously look at educating their officers in their own policies, QRNOs, KRNOs, National Defense Act, because what I saw across the country were COs who didn't have a clue about what the actual policies and rules were that they were supposed to be following. The other thing we need to really seriously look at educating everyone in the ranks, from private to general and the Navy equivalent, in the strategic corporal, learning to think for yourself and being comfortable in questioning an order, because that's we've got a problem. In February, I was in federal court, and the Crown lawyer told the court that they had no jurisdiction over the Chief of Defense Staff in military matters.
The Crown Court?
The Crown lawyer said that, yes. And so we have a problem. If we've got a Chief of Defense Staff who says that he doesn't have to follow the law and doesn't have to answer to the court, and that's the culture that he's propagating in his ranks, that's a problem. Canada has a problem because we've got a military that says they don't need to follow the law. They can do whatever they want. And I think that's probably been their experience. And I think the lawsuit and the ones that are coming are a huge wake-up call that they are actually accountable. So many were told you can't sue the Canadian Armed Forces if you're serving. Well, yes, you can. I like to remind them of two generals, General Stalker, he's a general now, and General Fortin are both have lawsuits against the Canadian Armed Forces while serving and have been promoted through the ranks. So that's an absolute myth that was used against people. Your career's over if you try to sue the Canadian Armed Forces for wrongdoing.
Right.
And having been in the nursing profession for over 2 decades before I was a lawyer, I know the impact of the possibility of being sued for making a mistake or getting it wrong. And I, if nothing else, would like to remind the chain of command in the Canadian Armed Forces that they can indeed be sued and they can indeed be named in lawsuits and be held personally liable for bad decisions.
That's a really good point. And I think it speaks to the bigger issue and that I was guilty of. I didn't know my own government well enough. I didn't know my Constitution charter well enough. Things started popping up and I just assumed, well, that's a human rights offense. Well, is it? I don't know. I didn't know the first thing about it. And that's one thing I admire the Americans for. They earned their Constitution because it was in blood. And ours was more or less handed to us. And it didn't feel like we earned it. It was just a process that happened. There was no war. And I'm not saying we need a war in order to have a constitution that's valuable, but I think it definitely makes it a lot more serious when your constitution is born out of blood. And we earned it. And I think most Canadians don't have a freaking clue what's in that thing.
Well, let
alone all of our laws.
Right. The other thing we've got is a constitution that is very, very new.
Right.
Not only do
It's never
most
been
people
tested,
not know
really.
what it said, but the Americans have 200 years, more than 200 years on us for challenging their government and holding them accountable. And so if you're wondering where some of my tactics are coming from, I'm looking to our neighbors to the south. How do you challenge your government? How do you challenge the chain of command? And, there needs to be a huge shakeup as far as I'm concerned in the Canadian Armed Forces. The ombudsman is useless. There's no teeth, and people were told not to contact their office regarding any of this mandate stuff. So, ineffective. In the States, they have what's called an inspector general who's outside the chain of command, and everything goes there. So grievances would go there. Concerns about their chain of command would go there. There's no hiding grievances in a bottom drawer, hoping that the guy is released before he can get that grievance moved up. And the inspector general in the States has teeth. They can bring charges. They can reprimand. And I think Canada needs that, because that's the only answer to the chain of command isn't going to fix itself. They're going to have someone impose it on them.
Yeah, and part of what I'm coming to grips with and realizing is we've been Canada the good for a very long time. We've rested on our niceness for 2 generations or so, maybe even more. And now the ugly head of that is starting to rear itself, because that niceness is actually not kind, because we're abdicating our responsibility to those that are in power, that have like the good governance and our best interests in mind. But now we're peeling back the curtain. We're saying, oh, wait, no, you don't. What have you been doing this whole time? If this is any indication of what it's going to look like in bad times here in Canada, things are going to fall apart very quickly, in my opinion. And I'd like to go back to Bart and ask you, there's folks, especially when I post, and I don't know if you've seen anything online, but I posted stuff about this, and specifically because it's within the context of health, fitness, and that's what I cover. And I get responses from folks that I know, I respect them, that this is a frivolous lawsuit. All these folks are just crybabies. They should just follow orders. What do you have to say to somebody that makes that type of comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm I'm so sick of it, really, like I said, because I've been fighting against this for quite some time. Like you mentioned Alexander Solzhenitsyn. That I've read that too. I posted about that too. It's probably one of the reasons I got in trouble. But yeah, about the idea of people standing up. So there's the truly asleep people that just listen to the CBC and they do whatever. But there's at least an equal amount of people that are awake and see what's going on. And as I've gone through this, I'm actually more upset with the people that know but don't do anything. Because people are away. Like if they're asleep, they're asleep. They're hopeless. You can try, but most of the time they're just so asleep you're never going to get through to them. What I was more angry with was, police coming up to you and being like if you're at a protest and they'd be like, "We're on your side." They'd whisper it. It's like, well,
Thanks,
say
man.
something then. It's like, I don't care. Like, you think I'm supposed to give you a pat on the back? You're hiding behind all the protesters and actually fighting against the protest. Very early on, I was just going to say too, like my wife and I, we didn't really want to participate in the protest because the police were vibrating. They were ready to start pummeling people. We took our kids with us. So we actually started a freedom convoy before it was even a thing in Moose Jaw.
wow.
We started a website called Freedom Convoy. And it was just to have local convoys. Don't go stand on a corner in a group because you're going to get a ticket, right? It was a way to, cat and mouse around protesting. So we actually started a protest, and again, I knew people supported us, and it was just a convoy every Saturday around Moose Jaw. The very first time we did it, nobody showed up. It was me, my wife, and our 3 kids in our minivan with signs all over it. But guess who did show up? 9 police cars to trail us through Moose Jaw, a family in a minivan. If you can believe
a lot of
that.
resources.
So again, eventually, I think our record was 6 cars that we had in the convoy every Saturday. But again, what struck me through that time was like, where is everybody? Because I know there's people out there. In the end, I retired, and then because we had the Freedom Convoy handle already, when the actual Freedom Convoy to Ottawa happened, we started getting a lot of their traffic. So we redirected them to where they needed to go and mirrored some of the information for them when they got shut down. But finally, during the Freedom Convoy, I saw some people come out. Like, it was the most incredible experience. I loaded up my motorhome and I joined the convoy, not with my family at first. I ended up going back and forth between here and Ottawa 3 times. The last time to pick up my family when Trudeau declared that children were illegal on Parliament Hill. So we were all there for that too. But again, what strikes me the most for Canadians is that the people that know what's going on need to start doing something, say something. Like, it's that we're not going to make it. It's going to be like Solzhenitsyn said. It's going to get to the point where people won't even say anything. They'll be cowering as their neighbors are getting dragged away. Well, we've got to get the crowbars and be ready to go. We got to fight before we get to that point. So, we're fighting communism right now.
That makes a lot of sense. And in the previous episode, I used a quote of his, and a paraphrase, but essentially it's, you just always assume that it can't happen here. The Russians, they didn't just assume that they would have a Gulag archipelago, that they would murder tens of millions of their own citizens. They were doing somewhat okay, but you never think that you turn on your neighbors like that, but they did. And they just constantly think, well, nope, it can't happen here. Same in Nazi Germany, can't happen here. They're, leaders of the free world back in the day. And slowly but surely, it just started getting eroded over time. So the ability to actually stand up, but not just virtue signal, which is the expression of the era right now. You just virtue signal. You put something on Twitter, you put something on Facebook, you go tell a friend, like, yeah, I'm with you, man. Okay, well, what are your actions? Because your actions speak a lot louder than your words, and I have to echo that loudly. So, Brett, I wanted to ask you, obviously, like, you're a fit dude, you got a good head on your shoulders, you're going to land on your feet, but what do you hope Canadians learn from this whole experience and what you had to go through?
just don't rely on the government for everything. Don't rely on them to tell you how to live and how to think. TV is called television for a reason. Television. They're telling you how to live. They're trying to manifest your life for you and tell your reality for you. And if you just turn the TV off and start thinking critically for yourself and start questioning things. I mean, for me, I question everything, and you should question everything because you don't know what's really going on until you start asking questions. And some people would say it's a mass psychosis formation or mass formation psychosis, I believe, and I actually agree with that. It's everyone's hypnotized. It just blew my mind, and it's just, it's just have just know that there's different perspectives out there, and think for yourself. And I know people have probably heard this a million times before, but it has to be said.
Yeah.
So
wise words, Brett. Wise words. Catherine, I'll send it back to you with a question that often pops up in my feed and comments about ideology. What I'm hearing here, from Brett and Bart, obviously these guys are like salt of the earth Canadians. Distinguished careers, sniper, snowbird, clearly very competent in what they do, clearly an asset to the country. But I know what's going to be said is, oh, well, these guys must be some right-wing fringe. And I've been labeled that. And I find it curious because I've literally been a liberal my entire life. And I say that a small L liberal because I believe in just liberal values. And I think most Canadians do. The party, whatever, it is what it is. But like Brett, I like keeping an open mind. And I want to ensure that the best human being gets the position in a political party. I want to ensure that the policies make sense. And in this case, nothing seemed to make sense. And everything came down to, are you on the left or are you on the right? So how do we dispel the myth that somehow if you are a denier or you do not believe in the government line that, hey, we all had to get vaccinated, it was the only way to protect the population, and if you didn't believe in the science, then somehow you belonged in some outcast community. What do we do about that, and how do we dispel that myth that somehow this is like a right-wing argument?
Well, I'm actually kind of glad you asked me that because I was asked by a mainstream reporter earlier this week, aren't you just encouraging conspiracy theorists by bringing this lawsuit? Which I thought was very interesting because I said, well, actually, no, because the lawsuit's not actually about COVID itself. So there you go. I'm not sure how we're going to heal the divide. We've had leadership in this country that has deliberately divided people in order for political gain. The politics of divisiveness, we see it around the world. To our neighbors to the south, we see it in Britain, we see it in Europe. We need to get to a place where the people in the middle are willing to talk to each other and willing to go back to the Canada that I remember. People could have different opinions and it didn't matter. We could still have a conversation, or if it got too heated, could walk away and live your life next door. I know growing up, at the time I was growing up, Catholics and Protestants were at war with each other, literally at war with each other. And Protestants weren't supposed to speak to Catholics and Catholics weren't supposed to speak to Protestants. Ironically, growing up in a Protestant family, one of my uncles and one of my aunts both married Catholics. And I distinctly remember the uproar that happened in both sides of their families that they had dared to marry outside of their religion. But if you ask me now, I don't think there's too much of a problem between Catholics and Protestants marrying each other and speaking to each other. So things can change. Shutting out the chatter from the people that are screaming the loudest, I think, is going to be the solution. The other solution would be to have our mainstream media go back to being actually journalists and reporters, not towing the party line, being willing to challenge what's going on, be willing to give people information and allow people to make up their own minds of what they're seeing. That could start with removing government funding and letting mainstream media, if it crumbles, it crumbles. Maybe out of it we get some really valid old school journalism where they have to back up what they're saying and expose corruption when it comes and not be so dependent on government money.
Yeah. I'm optimistic as well. I think there's still a long way to go through all of this. I think it exposed a really dark underbelly that we have to address as a country. And I'm lucky enough to have this platform, which was born out of really nothing. And now I get to talk to folks like yourself. And the fact that there is literally, I just saw Facebook is going to be scrubbing all news off their Canadian news off their platform. There's very little in terms of voices that are talking about this now on Canadian social media platforms. So I have a bit more of a serious duty now to make sure that we convey these messages that, you know, we have something to say. There was a wrong that was committed and we need to fix this. We need to address it. We need to come to grips with it. And, you know, Brett, I was thinking about what you were saying about the fact that, you know, you have war fighters that are amongst you. You're all, you know, working for the same team. And then they turned on you on almost like on a dime. And I'm hoping that that message that, you know, especially within the teams, like you have such diversity. At least my experience within the Canadian Armed Forces was, I grew up in a suburban area, but when I joined, I met everybody. All my friends looked like Jamaican and Indian, and I just had such a diverse experience. And then I got to go to foreign countries and meet all kinds. And I also got diversity of thought, which was so important. And I was really thankful for that, because I think had I not joined the Canadian Armed Forces, I would not have got that diversity of thought. And from what I learned was it's important to have that diversity of thought, because it allows you to be more effective on the battlefield. But now war's over. It's okay, back to status quo, shut your mouth and toe the company line. And I'm hoping that there's more that stand up and say, no, this is unacceptable, and that the leadership eventually starts to fill in the gaps where needed. And I hope this podcast serves as a means to convey those messages of hope and share your stories as well. Catherine, before we sign off here, I just want to see if are there any updates with respect to the court case, and if there are, could you share with the audience, please?
Yeah, not much to tell. The Crown has not yet responded to our statement of claim with their statement of defense. So, which is very interesting to me. Usually the Crown is quite quick to try and shut down any type of lawsuit, threaten to bring a motion to dismiss, etc. But they have not done so in this case. So that gives me some optimism. The other thing that I want to point out is King's Bench Justice here in Alberta this week came down with that the chief medical officer, her lockdowns, etc. in Alberta were illegal.
Oh.
And that's a huge step forward. That's a real change in our courts, because you know, I've been heard lots of people saying, well, the courts are corrupt and you can't get anywhere. But the courts need to be challenged just like everything else. And if Keith Wilson said it the best during the convoy, that if it takes this to expose that our courts are corrupt and need to be changed, well, then that's what this purpose would be. Mm-hmm. But my skill set is using what I have, and that's the court system. So there's a little bit of ray of sunshine coming out of Alberta. Once again, Alberta is leading the way. No wonder
saves the day.
The Trudeau Liberals don't like Alberta.
Saves the day. Those cowboys and oil riggers saving the day for the country.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Dave. Sorry, I wanted to add to what you said there too quickly before you say your final things there. Yeah, there was the war fighters and all those guys who turned against me. Yeah, there was a lot of those, but there was also a lot of guys that agreed with me and even came up to me and thanked me for what I was doing. There was a lot of guys, for example, no one in my platoon, or even a little bit above my platoon, said, go get this vaccine. They said, I know what you're doing, and this is just what's happening right now, and thank you for doing what you're doing. So there was a lot of critical thinkers within the military that are just too scared to fight this. So it wasn't like it was me against the whole world, right? Like there was a lot of people that agreed with me, and I would say 90 to 95% of my platoon was on the same side as me, and they just had, they just couldn't, they couldn't, they didn't have a choice, right? I had skills I could fall back on. Most people didn't. So I just wanted to like mention that because it wasn't. I don't want to sound like I was completely bullied because, to be honest, I think based off all the stories I heard, I had a little more respect from my chain of command than most people did in this lawsuit. The BS and the psychological came from the higher ups. That's all it was. So I just wanted to make sure that was said before we closed off there. Sorry about that.
It's good you clarified that too, because I mean, just from my outside in perspective, the overwhelming majority, and I think that's a big message that most Canadians don't get. Overwhelming majority, and the fact that you're mentioning it here, were not on board with this. But like you said, it's the golden handcuffs. Well, what am I going to do? Once you've joined when you're 18, this is the only thing I know. But it's this mentality that the things like the police and things like the army, they convince you that you're only good at this one thing, and if you leave, too bad, so sad, you're going to be a bum on the streets. And that is not the way the economy works these days. That is not the way we've grown up. We have skills that are marketable. I know I left, I landed on my feet, I'm doing better. Sure, I missed the military, but hell, I'm glad I'm not in because I wasn't going to be able to grow to where I am now. So yeah, that's a great point that you bring up there, Brett. Bart and Brett, I'll come back to you too, just with some final thoughts. Bart, what are some last thoughts you have before we sign off here?
Well, like I think I was trying to make that point mostly is that I know, and I get it, there, like, I hate to be so harsh, but there's so many good people that do agree with us, and I think there's a majority, but at a certain point, people, like I said, just to reiterate, we have to stand up. People have to be willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with us, or else things are going to continue to go south. Yeah, I know they're out there. We just have to have the courage to speak the truth unapologetically. And then we got to get to the next stage now where we demand justice. And I thank Catherine so much for taking that on because there's not a lot of people out there that would do it. So you're a hero in my eyes for taking this on. And I thank you very much. And I hope, justice always bends correctly. It's slowly, but it bends slowly towards justice, or whatever the saying is. And I think we're going to get there. And I just hope that people will be more willing to stand up against what we're seeing.
Right on. So thanks to all of you for coming on the show again. And I'm wishing you guys all the best with the lawsuit. It's definitely something we need to have here in Canada at this time to represent, like you said, we have to push back and we have to ensure that the system is working properly. And like you said, if it has to expose that the courts are corrupt, then we have to expose that the courts are corrupt. So I know there's going to be more to follow on this. And, thanks so much, guys, for sharing your stories here on the podcast. And folks, stay tuned for more. There's going to be more updates. That's for sure with this story. And don't forget, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.